Standard physics establishes a flawless operational baseline for the electron. We measure it with absolute precision as a negatively charged, spin 1/2 lepton with rest mass. These measurements accurately predict how the electron behaves in a vacuum or a circuit, but they provide no structural explanation for what the electron is. This chart contrasts the two viewpoints. On the left, the Bohr model represents the baseline, a fragment of matter orbiting a nucleus. The PSOC 43 framework on the right identifies the electron as a physical disclosure of coherence, held in a stable, boundary-bearing state. Within this framework, the electron functions as the boundary-bearing quantum condition, making structured matter physically possible. To locate the electron in the physical world, we must look at the continuous sequence of coherence, moving from unbound propagation to organized material structures. This diagram illustrates the triad. On the left, the photon is coherence released, a wave making its source transmissible. In the center, the electron is coherence held, a charged boundary making matter responsive. On the right, the atom is coherence organized into layered architecture. Released, held, and organized coherence form the three states of the structural grammar of visible reality. Translating the constants of quantum mechanics requires a unified language of constrained coherence. We have to map properties like mass and charge to specific structural disclosures. On the far left, rest mass represents closure persistence. When coherence is held in a resting boundary, it generates a measurable resistance across time. Mass is the stability cost of maintaining that distinct, localized identity. Electric charge in the center defines the boundary's coupling permission. It represents the structural capacity of the held coherence to participate in electromagnetic field relations. Sten 1/2 on the right functions as a disclosure signature. It indicates a half-turn geometry, which identifies the boundary as a fully individuated, non-coincident closure. Mass, charge, and spin are the integrated requirements of a stable boundary. They are the physical evidence of coherence held under constraint. Photons operate as bosons. As panel A shows, phase-unbound light can share the same state space without limit, allowing waves to overlap and amplify. In panel B, we see the behavior of bound coherence. Once coherence is constrained into an electron boundary, it must individuate. It is strictly forbidden from spatial overlap. This principle of non-coincidence is a generative force. It forces bound coherence to occupy distinct volumes, creating three-dimensional differentiation. Without this forced differentiation, the electron shells of the periodic table could not exist. This spatial separation prevents matter from collapsing into dimensionless sameness. Fermionic exclusion is the mechanism that builds material volume, creating the stable surfaces required for chemical interaction. The primary interface between light and matter occurs through a specific boundary transaction. This is where phase-unbound light meets bounded matter. Step 1 shows the intake phase. Phase-unbound coherence enters the charged boundary closure, increasing the energy state of the system. This triggers an immediate reconfiguration. The charged boundary must redirect this new energy, shifting its geometric state to accommodate the incoming phase and polarization. In step 3, the closure resolves back to its baseline by ejecting a quantum of phase-unbound coherence, a photon, back into the environment. Every optical property we observe, from color to reflection, is the visible result of these specific boundary reconfigurations. These boundaries stack to create the architecture of the atom. The red nuclear closure at the core provides the inward anchor and mass density for the system. Surrounding that core are electron shells. These are not planetary orbits, but distinct regions of permitted boundary architecture. The valence boundary at the outermost layer dictates chemical reactivity. It is a boundary seeking stable closure relations with the external environment. At the macroscopic scale, millions of interacting boundaries determine how a material interacts with energy. Insulators, on the left, are material structures that strictly hold local constraint. The architecture of the lattice forbids the flow of coherence between individual sites. Conductors permit boundary mobility across the entire lattice, allowing coherence to flow freely. On the right, the semiconductor acts as a conditional permission topology. The flow of coherence through this architecture can be tuned or gated by specific external inputs of light or energy. Macroscopic material behavior, from electricity to chemistry, is a direct expression of these electron boundary permissions. The definitive test of this framework occurs at the threshold where light becomes matter and matter becomes light. This process of coherence condensation, or pair production, occurs when phase-unbound light is forced into paired charged boundary constraints. The reverse mechanism, annihilation, occurs when complementary paired boundaries release their constraints. The system resolves back into raw, unbound photon coherence. This perfect reversibility indicates that the electron is fundamentally structured light, coherence held in a persistent boundary-bearing form. Solid reality is a temporary condition. It is what happens when coherence is held in check. These principles of boundary constraint scale from the subatomic level up through biology and modern engineering. Our technological systems are built on manipulating these exact boundary permissions. This map frames the electron as the bridge between light and matter. Integrated circuits, cellular chemistry, and simple atoms all operate on the same principle of photon exchange and constraint. The electron is not merely a particle moving through reality. It is the primary boundary condition through which light becomes stable, visible matter. Visible matter is the universe giving structure to light. The photon reveals. The atom organizes. The electron is coherence made boundary.